Tonight on the Ropen Network. For centuries, stories of immense winged creatures soaring over Alaska and North American wildernesses have persisted. Tales dismissed by many as folklore, yet impossible to fully explain away. These are the Thunderbirds, not merely relics of legend, but perhaps remnants of something far older and far more real.
My favorite Muriel. Welcome to the Ropen Network. I'm your host, Ken Gerhard. For this episode of Ropen Research, we dive into the groundbreaking work of seasoned cryptozoologist Ken Gerhard, who has dedicated his life to unraveling the truth behind these extraordinary sightings. Drawing from eyewitness accounts, indigenous oral histories, and decades of field research. He challenges the conventional science with compelling evidence that something massive and airborne still haunts our skies. Are these creatures ancient birds surviving relics of a forgotten era, or reptiles with wingspans that defy belief? And what do the indigenous communities who have known of these beings long before Western science have to teach us? Thunderbirds, myth, mistake, or modern mystery? Prepare to question what you thought was possible. Join us, and perhaps you too will believe.
There's a good chance we're dealing with an organic creature or we're dealing with supernatural entity.
Pterosaurs, according to evolution, have been extinct for 70 million years or so.
Our objective to research information that describes the truth about the entire cosmos.
And the name of the business is SJ Polygraph, which is directly behind me, where the examination will be taking place.
There's very good evidence that is indicating that they still are alive.
Lawndale, Illinois, July 25th, 1977. A night like so many others in that quiet town, sweltering, the kind of heat that wraps around you like a blanket, making the air thick and heavy. And yet, for all the mundanity of the evening, something uninvited slipped into the sky, something that would change everything. You see, not everyone remembers the details, who was exactly there. But the story, well, the story has lived on. I wasn't there that night. I didn't see the thing in the sky, nor did I know the boy or his family well. But I've spent years listening to the accounts, piecing together the fragments left behind. They say the boy lived, but he was never quite the same. His family, too. You can still feel it, that unease in the air every July. The birds fall quiet, the heat rises, and for one brief moment, everyone holds their breath, wondering if the sky will take again.
It was just past 7:30 when I heard it. That scream, not the kind kids make when they're playing. The kind that grabs your spine and doesn't let go. I saw it. A shadow. Massive. Impossible. Blotting out the sun. I dropped the dish. I ran out the door. And then, my boy was in the air.
I was just playing. It was a hot summer day. Me and Travis were chasing Willie around. My friends and I were having a great time. Travis was the first to look up. I remember his eyes widening as if he was in shock. Willie was in awe. Then fear, he started to scream. The sky cracked open. Something huge was above us. Travis began pointing upwards. The shadows revealed two large birds soaring overhead. I could feel one ever so close from behind, dark black, as I tried to run for cover. But then I felt the grasp of two talons, cold sharp, clamped around my shoulders. I was filled with terror, and then suddenly, I wasn't on the ground anymore. I remember hearing my mother screaming for me from behind. I was being taken. My spirit felt so far away. I must have gone at least 40 feet. After what felt like eternity, all of a sudden, the bird dropped me. I hit the ground and began screaming, calling out for my mother. The worst part was not the event, but what came after.
Marlon Lowe and his mother describe a cold black bird with a white ring around its neck, a body as big as a man's, and a wingspan of more than 15 feet in length. In the days to follow, Marlon became the subject of ridicule. He was dubbed the Bird Boy. The family would even find dead birds left on their porch from foolish deride. However, the skeptics and scorners were soon silenced by other journalists who published accounts from witnesses across the state. Was the Lowe attack an Andean condor? Condors need the mountains or steep canyons in order to create vectors, currents, what we call thermals, for them to ride on, and to gain altitude. Steve Latta is a condor expert at the National Aviary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He has this to say.
Andean condors are native to the Andes Mountains of South America, from Venezuela and Colombia in the north, all the way down to Chile and Argentina in the south. Condor is one of the largest flying birds. It can have a wingspan of up to 10 feet. It weighs as much as 33 pounds, and it stands as much as 4 feet tall. A single feather on the wing can measure up to 1.5 feet. Condors are scavengers, so they eat carrion, which is dead or decaying flesh. To find carrion, they need to fly long distances with their heavy body, and they rely on these huge wings and stiff feathers and strong thermals or air currents, which are produced by the mountains. And they soar over these mountains, flying very long distances. Condors can even fly for hours this way. Andean condors are closely related to our California condor. The California condor is a great conservation success story. Through breeding at zoos and conservation centers and releases of birds back into the wild, California condors have increased from just 22 birds in the 1980s to well over 200 today. They are mostly threatened by hunting because of the mistaken belief that they kill livestock. But loss of habitat, increases in pesticide poisonings are also big threats. Because condors are at the top of the food chain, they can bioaccumulate these pesticides, so they become more concentrated in the condors and become lethal.
Many avian experts say it is impossible for an Andean condor to lift something with its feet. Andeans, as well as the California condors, have feet much like a turkey, and unlike bald eagles and other birds of prey, that can't grasp or lift. X-ray analysis of the talons of vultures and eagles reveals a huge difference in the grasping ability of each bird. In the eagle, you can appreciate the relative heft and size of these bones, and compare that to the very slender nature of the bones on the turkey vulture. These are very large talons, the comparatively smaller claw on the end of the turkey vulture's foot. While a raptor like an eagle can lift its prey, that's not the same thing as lifting a 10-year-old child. For an eagle to be able to carry, say, an 8-pound cat, that eagle would probably have to weigh on the order of 18 or 20 pounds. And so, it would take a very large eagle, among the largest eagles that we know exist in North America, even to be able to carry a cat. Another issue, according to these experts, it is exceptionally rare for raptors to attack humans. The only circumstance that I can imagine an eagle actually attacking a human being is that that eagle was raised by people, what we call imprinted. We cannot totally ignore the possibility that they do exist, but at this time, science does not support the probability that giant birds exist in the modern world. To find a new species in the heartland of the United States seems improbable, though it would be very exciting to notice something that isn't in the guidebooks. There is no doubt what Marlon Lowe, his mother Ruth, and 5 others witnessed was a large bird. Just how large, we may never know. There's all kinds of phenomena we believe in that may not have enough scientific proof behind it. Why not monsters? Why not thunderbirds? Why not the incredible?
Last year, our network had the privilege of highlighting the research of champ enthusiast Katie Elizabeth. Now, her latest journey has taken her across the Atlantic to Scotland's Loch Morar, a remote freshwater lake. Loch Morar is said to be home of Morag, a creature often referred to as Scotland's cousin to Nessie. Katie also plans to investigate the legendary Loch Ness, home of the world-famous Nessie. In both locations, she'll be applying the same scientific methodology used in her previous work, employing side-scan sonar and echolocation to search for signs of these elusive lake dwellers. We're excited to follow Katie's continued research and wish her the very best in this fascinating exploration of cryptid lake phenomena.
The RRN Ropen Radio Network is brought to you by 511 Tactical. Always be ready. By Creation Evidence Museum of Texas. God's Word in 6 days. And by the Wildlife Safari, America's top cheetah breeding program. You are closer to Africa than you think.
Next, Thunderbirds, not just avians but reptiles too. A conversation with famous cryptozoologist Ken Gerhard. Well, congratulations on your fiance.
Yes.
You said she's from Oregon?
Yes. Banks.
Oh, okay. Yep,
Okay.
very familiar with that, yeah.
Actually, very familiar. Moving on to this next question I've been wanting to ask you for a long time. Not too long ago, you and I chatted. I think it was back in 2021, maybe February. And it was about an expedition to Australia that involved looking for the thylacine. I've been wanting to know, did you ever hear from this Hollywood producer, Helene Summers? What happened with all of that? Did that become anything?
No, unfortunately, it kind of fell through. I mean, I think a lot of it was the timing. Obviously, the COVID epidemic was kind of going on pretty actively throughout 2021. We had an opportunity, a colleague and I worked together quite a bit, go to Tasmania potentially and search for the thylacine or Tasmanian tiger. And as you mentioned, some are from that area. She has relatives who are actually like living out there and are kind of bushwhackers, I guess, they got out of the field. And she was also well connected with the government agencies and museums and things. So it looked pretty promising. But, having been through kind of some of these projects before, you always keep in mind that sometimes things just don't work out for whatever reason, funding or logistics or what have you. So at some point, I just kind of stopped hearing from him. And I just kind of assumed, what was funny is towards the end, they were telling me that they had drawn interest from Chris Hemsworth and his brother, the actor.
Really?
Who was from Australia and really interested in the thylacine mystery. And so I was thinking, oh, wow, they've got some heavyweights on board. But I think from what I've read, that the Hemsworth brothers have really become more involved with kind of the thylacine DNA genetics projects where they've been talking for years because they have viable DNA of these animals in mountain specimens and things that they would try to somehow revive the species.
Like colossal bioscience.
Yeah.
Genetic engineering and stuff.
7 books that I've counted at least. Am I wrong?
Sounds right.
Okay. With the most intriguing to me, that's dear to my heart, is Big Bird, 2007.
Yeah.
In terms of winged cryptids, because they aren't as well publicized as the other types, it's possible that there are many more people that have seen them, but have just never found a researcher that was interested, or
maybe too scared to come
maybe
forward.
they didn't even realize that what they saw was really supposed to exist.
Yeah.
Right.
It got me a lot when I talk to Thunderbirds that someone will say, wow, I saw this giant bird with a 20-foot wingspan one time, and I just thought it was a really crazy, weird bird that I didn't know about. But yes, winged cryptids are a fascinating mystery. I've never seen or physical evidence of one, but I have interviewed many dozens of seemingly credible people that swear that they've seen them. And of course, you also have the other layer of evidence in antiquity, which is, legends, folklore, traditions of things.
Mm-hmm.
Looking here at North America, for example, we have many Native American tribes that have traditions of giant winged creatures that are separate from species like eagles and things like that, much larger and more powerful, often adorned with kind of abilities to control the weather or shoot lightning out of their eyes, create thunder with any of their wings, which is where we get the name Thunderbird, right? The Lakota tribe have the Wakiman, to the Cherokee, the Klanawa, to the Pawnee, the Huhuk. You have the Binese of the Algonquin, the Abenaki, the Chegwe, I believe. I mean, there's different examples of what we call thunder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Coming from different native cultures all over the continent. So to me, that's pretty compelling.
Yes. It is. It's very compelling for evidence, too.
So you talked about all these different tribes and everything that reported. For our viewers listening and stuff, and people getting excited about this and wanting to jump in, what's some advice you could get so that you don't get hooked into fraudsters or people that, you can end up going down a rabbit trail and posting something that's totally, fake. How do you guide yourself through that community?
That's a good question.
Oh, man. Well, hoaxing has always been a part of cryptozoology, unfortunately. In the Bigfoot field, there are people that fake films and footprints. With regard to the Loch Ness Monster, many faked photographs have been proven to be hoaxes. And there are, just a lot of people that make up stories for whatever reason. They want attention or money or, so... What I would say is, try to be as pragmatic as possible. I think it's very difficult for many researchers to separate their confirmation bias or desires from the evidence or what is most probable. So, of course, when we look at any of these mythological creatures, whether it's Bigfoot or Nessie or Thunderbirds, obviously we all want them to exist.
Yes.
I mean, that would make our world so cool and interesting to have those things here. And I think there's a strong chance that they do exist.
Yeah.
And just haven't been documented by scientists. But, we also have to keep in mind that, the hoaxes happen. Also, people can misidentify, I should say, different types of animals that they're not familiar with, particularly if they're only getting a fleeting glimpse, or if it's at night, or the adrenaline's pumping, you hear something, you turn, something is there and gone. So that happens as well. So I guess what I'm trying to just say is that most cryptids are what I refer to as composite identity, meaning that there's a lot of different things that are kind of being put together under the umbrella of the name Bigfoot, Thunderbird.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. So I don't know. I guess just be objective. Try not to get too emotionally invested in any idea or piece of evidence or anything like that. And sadly, with the evolution of AI, I mean, we've gotten to the point where alleged photographic evidence is pretty much useless at this point, because anyone can fake anything. It's pretty simple now to fake an image or a video of something that doesn't exist. And so we can't really put any credibility, in my opinion, into alleged photographic evidence. It's going to come down to, it's going to come down to physical evidence, or possibly physical trace evidence, the sign that something has been somewhere. And I guess if we have enough corroboration in terms of eyewitness accounts, I mean, scientists won't accept that as strong evidence, but I think if you get enough of those consistent corroborating accounts together in a particular area from particular types of eyewitnesses, that might have some strength.
If they're really out there, that doesn't make sense that they don't want people to see them or not. In your opinion, why is the professional community so want to suppress it so much? Why don't they want to even look? Is it just denial?
Or is that your personal experience or what you've seen for yourself?
Have you experienced it yourself? It almost seems like...
Well, let's define, what are we referring to as the professional, you mean
mainstream
like scientists?
Yeah, mainstream scientists, yeah.
Well, it would be embarrassing for mainstream science to acknowledge that there's something major that they've overlooked, So, I mean, that's an obvious thing, The scientific community obviously doesn't want to acknowledge that there are things out there that they've overlooked that are large undiscovered species or undocumented species. I mean, that would certainly hurt the credibility of mainstream science in general. I'm not really a big conspiracy guy, so I don't really see that the government is covering anything up. I mean, maybe on some levels they would consider it a headache to have to deal with some of these things, because it might create issues, either socioeconomic or whatever. So, I do acknowledge that might happen to some extent. But I don't think it's so much a suppression as just they're just ignoring it. They don't really pay attention to any of the evidence as far as the eyewitness accounts or alleged videos or whatever evidence we're talking about. So
that was a great answer. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Status quo. Yep.
Which makes me come to this next part. Now we can finally get into this. The Thunderbird holds a significant place in art, storytelling, and ceremonies of Native American tribes across North America. The Thunderbird depiction, and associated stories can vary slightly among different tribes, but the general themes of power and weather control remain consistent. And it's interesting how they mention weather control, things like that, because of the wings and everything. I could be wrong. For the audience's sake, Ken, tell me what you personally think what a Thunderbird is. What is a Thunderbird?
Okay, well, that's a great question. We have to recognize that at least in modern times, the name Thunderbird is being applied to potentially two different types of winged cryptids, okay? So in terms of people that I've interviewed through the years, there are two general archetypes that come up. One is more like the traditional Native American Thunderbird, which seems to be a bird of prey because most eyewitnesses describe a hooked beak, which is a characteristic of an accipiterid or a raptor, right?
Eagle.
The average estimated wingspan of these types of Thunderbirds, which are always described as having feathers or plumage, which is definitely a bird characteristic, nothing reptilian or not any other class of animals. Feathers are birds. And generally, those are described as being kind of either a black or a gray, dark gray color, sometimes brown, but always a solid dark color.
Okay.
No like white trim.
No, nothing majestic.
Yeah, they're very like kind of dull, kind of like big vultures, basically. The average estimated wingspan is about 14 or 15 feet, and we have to quantify that by recognizing that people are somewhat bad at estimating the size of things that are flying around in the air, right? I mean, it's hard for us to judge the altitude or how far away something is.
That'll be a question for later.
Sometimes these Thunderbirds are said to perch on things or land on the ground, and then they become man-sized and whatever. But 14 or 15-foot wingspan, solid dark feathers, hooked beak. So I get those types of reports a lot.
Okay.
And those kind of align with the Native American ideas of traditional Thunderbirds, which were portrayed as super eagles, like twice as big as eagles or vultures or condors or other big birds like that. The other type of so-called Thunderbird, eyewitnesses describe something that they describe as looking, quote unquote, prehistoric. And some people have tried to lump them together with traditional Thunderbirds by saying that it looked like either a prehistoric bird or, a leathery bird or something like that. But the characteristics that come up in those types of reports are pretty commonly associated with what we call pterosaurs, which are a lineage of flying reptiles.
Correct.
Or archosaurs. Not really dinosaurs, but related to crocodiles, birds, and dinosaurs and all those different groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the pterosaur types are always described as having kind of leathery or bat-like wings, like membranous wings, not feathered. And sometimes they display other characteristics we associate with these pterosaurs, including a head crest or a hump on the back of the head, and or a long tail with a fin shape on the end. And those are, of course, diagnostic of early types of pterosaurs known as rhamphorhynchoids. So those two types of winged cryptids are often lumped together as Thunderbirds. But I think the feathered type have more of a claim to that name, and then the other type are definitely still a bona fide mystery.
I agree.
And the sizes also, with the pterosaur type, there are two sizes described. There's the 15 to 20 foot wingspan, like a big pterodactyl or pteranodon.
Big, yeah.
And then there's the smaller 5 to 6 foot wingspan, which kind of matches with the earlier or smaller types of pterosaurs like rhamphorhynchoids. So a little bit of just, and the colors, as far as the pterosaur type, I get a lot of tan or brown descriptions or reddish. Some people say reddish, not really a true red. And then sometimes gray or black or, dark gray.
Yeah, kind of like a bat. Something you see in the night sky that's like, hey, it's dark color. I don't really get anything about anything that's vibrant, multiple colors or whatever.
Only on the totem poles.
Yeah. What about the geographic locations? Is this mostly stick to the Midwest? Is this Alaska? As far as the avian types, what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Well, one interesting problem I have a map, and I'm afraid I don't have an image or anything to show you, but maybe I can send it to you later.
Please, I would like that,
yeah. I've marked on a map of the United States different types of Thunderbird reports, and they do to some extent overlap.
Wow.
So you have certain areas where you get a lot of traditional Thunderbird and also pterosaur accounts in the same regions. So that kind of muddies the waters even more. Are people seeing one type and thinking it's the other type? They're just unsure about what they're seeing or what have you. In terms of the traditional Native American Thunderbird types, there are 4 particular states that, for whatever reason, have a lot of reports. And they are Pennsylvania, Illinois, Texas, and Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then in terms of the living pterosaur reports, they're kind of all over. But you get these flaps on specific concentrated areas. For example, from 2008 to 2014, I was getting a lot of reports from northern Georgia and the Appalachian Mountains in that region. Pardon me, I'm getting a little dry here. Overlapping with that flap, from 2009 to 2011, I had got multiple reports from Michigan and the Great Lakes area.
Mm-hmm.
And then from 2014 to 2016, I got a flurry of reports from central Oklahoma. And then most recently, I've gotten reports from New Mexico and places like that.
Yeah.
As far as the living pterosaur types, and this will be interesting to compare notes, Jake, but there are a lot of reports from South Texas extending into New Mexico, Arizona, and Southern California, and kind of those dry, semi-arid desert habitats. And then I get a lot of reports from the Great Lakes area, from states like Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are a number of reports from the Appalachian region, mostly like northern Georgia, eastern Tennessee, and some of those areas.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
It's quite the spread. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I'm sure you get Florida as well. I mean, I'm sure you've gotten reports from just about every state.
Florida. Sure.
Yeah. And then I've got reports from Canada. I'm sure he's got that too.
Same ones, yep.
Alaska. And you're one.
Some from Canada.
It's true. I mean, they do kind of overlap with the testimonies. But it's like, okay, this is where some people have said, oh, they just don't understand the anatomy. They can't decipher bird from reptile. I think they can.
Yeah.
Because clearly there's distinct features about pterosaurs versus the Thunderbirds. You brought up something that's very important. Maybe people can't, do not understand. You have to have something to compare it to in the sky.
Reference, yeah.
And I know they conducted a test on MonsterQuest to see if people could really come away with a proper size. I don't know how many people they talked to, so I'm a little suspicious of that.
What was the result of it?
That most people couldn't determine the proper size of the...
They were all over the map.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they also said that, okay, what they had was a kite, and it stayed in place.
Oh.
So if you really want some good understanding analysis of this thing needs to be moving, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. But I don't think it's a fair assessment to have it just stay in place and then say, oh, let's pick out a certain amount of people here.
Right.
And see what they have to say.
Right.
But it's still,
I agree with
the test
you
is
100%
important.
It is, yeah.
Anyway.
It's one other thing to add is that when people are in a state of excited panic or frenzy or whatever you want to call it, heightened emotion, it's not uncommon for them to overestimate the size of things by up to 30% or a third.
Sure.
So when you hear about these wingspans that are like 25, 30, bigger, I think a lot of those might just be overestimations of something that has a 14 or 15 foot wingspan, which is still
big.
Huge.
Yeah.
twice as big as an eagle. A bald eagle or a golden eagle has about an 8 foot wingspan. So if you double that, then yes, most people would be pretty shocked to see something like that flying around, and they might add some length onto that, because it's so overwhelming.
Yeah, unless maybe they're really good with math.
But it's the old thing. I caught a fish. It was that big, and it's just really small because that energy, that excitement behind it.
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead.
No, I was wondering, is there some encounters that you can share with us in the audience where you've actually seen some yourself, or
something profound?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen anything myself per se, but I can share a few encounters with you that might be of interest to you.
Avian related, or
the original sighting that kind of got me interested in this mystery happened in. I interviewed a gentleman in 2003 named Guadalupe Cantu, who claimed he saw this, what he described as a leathery bird, or he said it was like those things on the Flintstones cartoon. And he wasn't very educated in terms of different types of animals and things. He just knew it wasn't a bird.
Right.
And he said it had about a 5-6 foot wingspan. It was kind of a tannish color. And he described and sketched out the head crest and the long tail with the fin on the end. And he, when I interviewed him back in 2003, that kind of sparked my interest in these types of cryptids. Now, he had his sighting in 1982 or 83 when he was younger in Pasadena, Texas. And I was aware of almost an identical sighting or description from a gentleman named James Thompson down in Los Fresnos, Texas, who also saw something like that in 1982 or 83.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of sparked my interest. And then having appeared on shows like MonsterQuest and other TV shows where I'm talking about Thunderbirds or winged cryptids, I've had many people reach out to me through the years with eyewitness testimonials.
How exciting.
And most of them are pretty credible. I mean, people don't really embellish too much. Now, we were talking earlier about how do you separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of, sometimes I'm more skeptical of these really sensational accounts where, people are being physically attacked and they've got a gun and they're shooting it and things like that, where it almost seems like a scene out of a movie or something.
Right.
And also when people give you a description and they're very verbose, loquacious, and they're just going on and on about little details about, the wind was blowing this way and it's almost like storytelling.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas I'm more convinced by people that basically just give me very basic, concise descriptions. My brother and I were doing this. We saw this thing fly over. We both looked at each other like, what the heck was that? We saw it for a few seconds and this is what it looked like. One of my favorite accounts, I never interviewed the eyewitnesses, but if you go back to February 24th, 1976, when there were many sightings of the big bird in South Texas, there were 3 school teachers in South San Antonio who actually saw 2, what they described as pteranodons flying around in the sky with 20-foot wingspans. They said they could see the skeletal structure in the wings and the membranous thin wings. And those 3 teachers were interviewed by the local newspapers and were pretty adamant that, what they saw was not a big bird or something like that. It was something unknown.
Okay.
How cool.
And so you had 3 corroborating witnesses there. Now, there was some suppression. We talked about that earlier, too. The school district didn't really want these teachers coming out and talking to the media because they were worried about students at the school getting freaked out and scared.
Yeah.
So they didn't really want to promote that sighting too much.
But that wasn't a nefarious reason. That was a different kind of reason why.
Just let's not create a panic kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned with one eyewitness, 5 to 6 foot wingspan. Is that what you said? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I've gotten that a lot.
Okay. And you mentioned the head crest, and then you also mentioned the tail. So that automatically, to me, throws me into the Ropen. Because, again, we're going into the paleontology field where we're saying, okay, look, we have not found or discovered a pteranodon with a tail.
Yeah.
Well, let's also consider that there's very few people devoted to pterosaurs working on the fossils.
That's correct.
I've said this over and over again. There's not many of them. I think the number is like maybe 21 by now, or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But it's very few. It's just not many compared to the others out there who are devoted to the T-Rex or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay? So when I hear that of crest and tail, it definitely throws everybody for a loop, especially the paleontology community, because they're like, no, it's not possible. I beg to differ because we do have sightings of the Ropen, which is the tail and head crest, but much bigger. The other thing, too, to consider is, do pteranodons, can they be that size? Because usually these are very, very big pterosaurs.
Yeah.
and some would say they mostly stick to the coastline. Now they can migrate wherever they want to. But that gets tricky because if you're wanting to rely on nothing but paleontology work, that's fine. But you also have to keep an open mind, and which I prefer to do. But that one does... It is suspicious.
Yeah,
a little
I would
bit,
say so,
because,
absolutely.
and that's just me. I could be wrong. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. I have a friend who's a paleontologist, and he's pointed out to me many times that there's a vast amount of speculation that goes on with regard to paleontology because the fossil evidence is often lacking. You know, there's big gaps in terms of fossils and things. So there's a lot of speculation that goes on. I'm sure you're right. There's probably just a small number of specialists that are working in any particular facet of paleontology. I have a limited knowledge of different types of species, but I know that there was, for example, a Rhamphorhynchus type known as Scaphognathus, which was had kind of not as big as the Pteranodon head crest, but it did have a little bit more of a head crest and the long tail. And I think they were smaller, you know, maybe a few feet in terms of the wingspan.
Mm-hmm.
So
that might fall in that category.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of this we could probably attribute to just confusion in terms of somebody, an individual having a remarkable experience, being unprepared for that experience, and perhaps even not having a lot of knowledge in terms of what they might be looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was at the San Antonio Zoo, I spent a lot of time standing by the jaguar. And people would come up to the jaguar all day and say, cheetah, 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 which obviously cheetahs have spots.
You have to look at the spots more carefully.
Rosettes, jaguars are huge and powerful and muscular, and cheetahs are long-legged and skinny and small heads, flat heads. People would even come up to the jaguar and say tiger, which obviously it doesn't even have stripes, but it's a tiger. Right. So that's probably a factor in terms of people just being unfamiliar with what types of animals are out there, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Have you had a lot of interaction with these different tribes and talked to them?
I was curious by that. Have you spent time speaking with the natives of these tribes and just get a feel from them what they really think?
Not a ton, honestly. I've spoken to Tlingit people in Alaska about their Thunderbird legends. I know I've spoken with some other Native Americans that have had sightings, but no access to like tribal elders or anything
it's
where
hard.
you would get like real big picture, you know. And as you guys know, having spoken to Native American people, they're not always real eager to share their traditions and legends with outsiders.
You have to gain
like
their trust.
You know, it's those things are sacred to their culture and to their traditions. But you brought up a good point and something that I want to underline, which is I don't agree with people when they try to lump all Native American traditions together and say, well, Native Americans thought this about Thunderbirds.
No.
Right. Because you literally have hundreds of different cultures and, you know, languages and things. And so they all should be kind of approached on a case by case basis, you know, and not lumped together. So,
yeah. Let me go into this now. I think this is important. What do you think of the Chief A.J. Huffer footage of 1977? Yeah. I think it was no, it's not black and white, or maybe it was black and white, or a little bit of color.
No, it was color, but it was from 1970. Yeah.
No, okay, so they mentioned that we have two birds there, maybe a third, I think, from what I saw. But one of them you mentioned was not a turkey vulture. One of them was a turkey vulture, but the other one could have been something else. Am I mistaken there, Ken?
I think it's the most compelling footage out there. It was filmed July 31st, 1977 at Lake Shelbyville in Illinois. One of the two birds, there's two birds that were perched in a tree, and according to Huffer, he blew the horn on his boat. They took off, flying away over the treetops, and then he got out his camera and filmed them. Now, one of the two birds is significantly larger. And I've seen thousands of turkey vultures in my life. In Texas, I saw several every day. It does appear to be larger than a turkey vulture to me. Now, it's hard to estimate exactly how big the wingspan is, but I think it's intriguing footage, but, inconclusive, obviously, all these years later. So
Something inconclusive. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's like he could only get one view of it as it went by.
Yeah.
It'd been nice, again, we go back to it'd be nice if he could actually get in front of it or whatever.
Yeah, I was just reviewing that video this morning, so yes, it's exciting. Yeah.
Well, I think I like how his approach. He blew his horn to get them to move. That startled them.
Yeah.
Because then you can get a better understanding of the anatomy.
Exactly.
To see just what kind of creature this is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a fascinating video, and it may be the only thing we have so far of a Thunderbird.
Yeah.
A big Teratorn-like in this case. But we also have Marlon Lowe from July 25th, 1977, at the age of 10, who had potentially 2 Teratorns or condors.
Mm-hmm.
He was with 2 other children, his friends, Travis and Willie at the time.
Okay.
And he mentioned that the wingspan was up to 20 feet.
Wow.
But they also said this one picked him up and carried him. And I think he also said 40 feet off the ground, something like that. And this happened in Lawndale, Illinois. And the 70s are a hot time for all this strange activity. I can't say this enough. It's the 70s is when something just happened. And this is where everybody's, I know maybe a portal opened or something like that. No, it's just hot time for some reason. But anyway, this is a very intriguing story because then I look at the scientific part of it. Okay, if this large condor-like bird, probably more likely a condor, the white ring around its neck,
correct, yes,
would actually say condor, would make sense. If it was a large bird, what size would it need to be to pick him up? And if it is picking him up, some have suggested, okay, it's got to tear into his skin, almost rip his arm off. No, I don't think that's true at all.
No.
Because if you compare eagle and condor, they're not the same. They have different anatomies to their talons.
Correct.
Okay? I think that eagles might be a little bit more sharper with the talons. But enlighten me on this one, Ken, a little bit more. I'd like to try to understand this encounter. And if you actually spoke with Marlon, I'm sure you probably have over the... No?
No, I've tried to contact him several times. I've never... he's not very visible in terms of an online
He doesn't want to be, huh? Maybe it's just...
I know people that have spoken to him, and he's talked about how he still has scars and things even all these years later, but...
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's an intriguing case. Obviously, there were 7 eyewitnesses who saw him get picked up and carried.
There were 7.
He was only carried about 35 to 40 feet, and it was only about a couple feet off the ground, so he never really got that high up.
So he wasn't carried upwards, it was
free.
just distance-wise.
Yeah, just he was running it, picked him up, and it carried him for about 35 or 40 feet, but just above the ground.
Okay.
Which still is pretty remarkable. In terms of a raptor like an eagle, with powerful grasping talons, it would have to weigh twice as much as Marlin in order to pick him up. At least twice as much. That's the physics. So we're talking about a bird that would have to weigh 120 pounds because Marlin weighed about 60 pounds at that time, even though he was a small boy.
Yeah.
This becomes problematic in terms of something like a condor or vulture because they really don't have the strength in their feet to pick and grab something that heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was like a traditional Native American Thunderbird, whatever it is, a Teratorn or some kind of monster eagle, then, maybe. I mean, still kind of hard to believe. But there's also, Marlin's perspective. He was the closest, but the adults that were on site estimated that the wingspan was only 10 feet across on these birds, which is big, but not as,
it's a normal size for a condor.
Bigger than an eagle flitting about. But, again, I'm convinced that something did pick him up and carry him because there were so many eyewitnesses.
Yes.
Wasn't a turkey vulture. But beyond that, I don't know. I guess it was a Native American Thunderbird.
Yeah, and I have to ask the question too. It's like, okay, if it's a condor, someone would say, okay, aren't they native to other places, not Illinois? Well, it's not true. They can migrate.
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
They can just pass on through. And the fact that it carried him, not lifted him up high, tells me that, okay, this is not working out. I tried. I'm letting go. And this could also stand the reason why it wasn't as big as everybody originally thought.
Right.
Now, he said 20 feet when he looked up. He said it was 20 feet.
Okay.
Wingspan.
Well,
but
here's going to be kind of different.
Exactly.
Recollections.
So here's a good question for you too, then, Ken. When you have someone who's young, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, like Jason McLean.
Right.
Everything looks bigger to them, doesn't
Absolutely.
it? At that age? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the way I feel too. Because
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the encounter resonates with them. It stays with them, and they're adamant about what they've seen. But the size at that age could be, appear monstrous to them. And if you look at the Andean condor versus the California condor, the Andean is the largest aerial in the world at 4 foot. California, largest land at 4.5. North America, both have 10-foot wingspans.
Oh, so, it's right spot on there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more likely. I mean, I'd love it if it was a huge one, but I think it seems like it's more likely a 10-foot wingspan. Here's something else, too, that I find really fascinating, and this was your great show that you did, Missing in Alaska. And I got a chance to watch that over and over again. It was a great episode. And it was season 1, episode 11, Mount Marathon, where you and your team went out and investigated this whole area. And there was a report of the missing jogger. I think it was Jenna Miller. Yeah, Jenna Miller, who was jogging on Mount Marathon, and she was never seen again. And there's a lot of people who go missing in Alaska. I think it was reported at 60,000. Ken?
A year?
No.
Oh, total.
No, that was over a few decades. But still, that's a very high percentage of when you consider there's only 700,000 people in Alaska.
Oh, that's a big.
It's like 10% of the population or something. I think that's actually an exaggeration. There's probably like 50 to 60,000 missing person cases since 1980 something. But subsequently, many of those people didn't turn up, or the disappearances were explained. But still, a heck of a lot of people do vanish in Alaska. That's true.
David Paulides stuff.
Yeah.
With missing people.
411, you mean?
Yeah, and it makes me wonder how much of this is Thunderbird related, Because what's interesting is we have another person starts with an M. I think his name is Marlowe.
Okay.
And he was the last to see her because he warned her there was a coming storm. And she listened to him, but she still went on her way. A lot of people go up and jog that mountain. So he eventually saw something coming out of the clouds, a giant bird that had a hooked beak.
Wow.
So eagle-like, or maybe even condor-like. There's a lot of them. A lot of variations that have the hooked beak.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
But he saw that, and it dive-bombed her direction, which is a pretty scary thought.
Yep, it is.
So it makes me wonder if this thing actually took her, and that's why nobody ever found her again. They never found her body.
Nothing. No sign, crime scene, nothing, huh? No.
Not that I know of.
No trace of anything. Wow.
I was going to say, any new developments on that one, Ken, that you heard of? That did they finally discover a body at all?
No, gosh. Admittedly, it's been about 10 years since we filmed that show, and I haven't really heard anything about any of those cases.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No follow-up or anything, so I don't know.
You spoke with Marlowe. I think you went to his home, and he showed you a video of what he thought he captured. He said, I can do better than this. I can show you, instead of a picture, I'll show you a video of what I filmed.
Oh.
And I think that turned out to be a turkey vulture too, didn't it? During the analysis, I think you took it to...
It looked like it, and what was weird is that turkey vultures are not native to Alaska.
No, they're not.
So we wonder if he may have filmed that somewhere else in some other location or something. It was hard to tell from what I can remember.
I love that you're offering classes and stuff like that.
Tell us how they can find you if they wanted to take your class. What can they do?
Yeah, just go to my website, kengerhard.com. There's a link at the top if you want to enroll in the
straightforward.
classes or get more information. Or you can go to Patreon, and it's free to follow me on Patreon at Exploring Cryptozoology. And or they can just find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever.
And I must say that when I first reached out to him about this expedition to Australia, I wasn't sure I was going to get a response, but I did. And for anyone who, we all see you as a celebrity of this field. So to see you here, and this is why I've always said, hey, this is a humble man.
Yeah.
He loves this research, he loves his work, and he's willing to talk to people. He's a busy man too, though. Yeah. So sometimes it takes time, but you know what? He loves hearing from others. And
yes.
That's what we really, really appreciate about you, Ken.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Fiery.
It's been great to join you today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Because you wrote the book, because you've experienced eyewitness testimony, you listened to them, you've investigated, am I correct in assuming that you believe that there is, to some extent, that these creatures have survived over the decades? I found a way to survive. Or is it just a great mystery to you? Or, again, maybe there's some truth to this. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I always try to remain as agnostic as possible in terms of, it's dangerous sometimes to get too attached to a belief or a hypothesis or what have you. I think I'm open-minded to the possibility that there are very large winged animals that have not yet been documented by science, or that were documented by science in the fossil record, and that they don't recognize that these particular lineages are still around in very small but viable breeding populations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's possible. I don't know if it's as probable as other, like the thylacine obviously is more of a palatable idea that because we knew that they were around up until the 1930s, 40s, and maybe up until the 1980s. But to me, from my perspective, just the possibility that these things do exist is fascinating enough to where I want to dedicate lots and lots of time and energy into trying to figure out the mystery, and also want to be available to people that have had experiences that they can't explain and that they need an outlet or someone to talk to. And generally when people come to me with an account, I'll tell them, I can't say 100% what you saw, or, I can't give you a conclusive answer, but I can tell you that other people have seen similar things, similar descriptions, and perhaps in that area or in a similar time frame or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes that's very reassuring to people that have had these experiences, because at least, excuse me, they're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily nuts or crazy. They've had an experience they can't explain. Other people have had very similar experiences. So that's compelling.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So that's where my passion comes from in this field. It's not the belief that they exist, but it's the idea that they could exist, that there's enough evidence to investigate it and try to find definitive answers.
I like it.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, on behalf of the Ropen Network, Ken, and CC Media, I would like to extend our deepest thanks for your extraordinary research. Yes. Your work in cryptozoology has inspired me, opening a window into the mysterious and often overlooked corners of our natural world. What resonates the most, beyond the legends, lore, and compelling investigations, was the deep respect and genuine love you have for animals as well, both known and unknown. It is clear to all of us associated with this field that your passion is rooted not only in the thrill of discovery, but the profound experience and appreciation for the creatures that share our planet, whether they walk in plain sight or remain hidden or unknown. You brought a sense of wonder and reminded us that science and storytelling can and should coexist. We are truly grateful for your time and the research you have shared with all of us. We wish you all the best in your continued pursuits, and may your path be filled with fascinating encounters, whether the curious creatures or curious minds. Grateful for you being here. It's a pleasure to finally speak to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken, so much. It was nice meeting you.
Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate your kind words. I'm truly humbled. And, there are two words that I associate with being a successful, or at least a researcher with some sense of longevity, and that is passion, which is easy. We all can be passionate about the idea that some of these things might actually exist. And then the second word is patience, because a lot of times it takes a long time to kind of figure out where you're going or what you're trying to solve or whatever. So passion and patience, those are the two words that I'll put out there if anyone's wanting to get into this field. And thank you for having me on the Ropen Network. It's definitely an honor to be with you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Well, we'll let him get back to his weekend, and hope to chat with you again sometime in the future. You take care, and God bless, sir.
Sounds good, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Join us again next time as we dive deeper into the realm of the hidden animal. Until then, seek the truth.